Good Sunday evening, everyone, and welcome to another Southern Oregon Weather Weekend Update. We'll start with a review of our current conditions. We'll discuss our 7-day forecast, our mid-range teleconnections, and as usual, we'll end with the latest look at our long-range trends. Here's the radar image from the KMAX on top of Mount Ashland showing quite a few showers over the area under northwest flow. These showers are actually producing some snow at the higher elevations. Here's a webcam from the base of Windsor on Mount Ashland. On the upper left-hand corner and on the lower right, you see the live image from the Steele Visitor Center at Crater Lake. So it looks like generally coating to an inch over these higher areas. This shower activity was expected. If you listened to last week's forecast, we were anticipating some showers for this weekend. And here is our current 500 millibar map according to the GFS. You can see this system that produced showers over our area today and yesterday, moving into the Rockies, the ridge over the lakes, and here's Tropical Storm Cristobal, and then a trough departing New England. This is very similar to the look that we get from MJO Phase 2. This was our position yesterday, kind of on the border between 1 and 2. And here, according to the European model, we should be in Phase 2 today. Here's the 500 millibar look that we would expect from Phase 2. See that trough moving through the west with a little bit of ridging over the lakes, some form of trough exiting New England. That's pretty similar to our 500 millibar pattern that we're observing right now. So interesting once again to see the correlation there. Now by midweek we have a modest ridge building over our area, and that's going to lead to some warmer temperatures again. Just like last week, nothing crazy, but highs maybe getting into the low, maybe mid 80s. But then again, just like last week, it looks like we'll see a return to showers by the weekend. This is Friday morning. You can see another trough moving into our area. And once again, that's largely because the MJO is going to stay around in Phase 2 for the foreseeable future at this point. It's kind of a standing wave pattern developing. But at least for the next 10 days, there's a pretty strong indication on quite a few of the models that the MJO is going to camp out in Phase 2. Here we can see that depicted in a different way. Here's an outgoing long wave radiation map from the GEFS ensemble. So here where there are negative OLR anomalies, that indicates cloudiness and precipitation. And this here is a Phase 2 look. Phase 2, maybe a little Phase 3. But you can see this blue area is pretty much in the same place over the next 2 weeks according to the GEFS. So MJO is continuing to stay in Phase 2, and that's why, even though we do see this midweek warming, we see another return to showers by next weekend. So there's all that information depicted by the Weather Channel. You can see our midweek warming, and then showers return again for the weekend. So what can we expect after that? Well, there are a couple factors at work. The first is that the PNA is forecast to rise strongly according to the GEFS, and on about the same timeline, the North Atlantic oscillation is supposed to go negative. By June 13th, 14th, both of these oscillations, both of these indices have made their flip. And once that flip happens, this is the 500 millibar correlation with a positive PNA and a negative NAO in June. It's a signal for troughing along the west coast. So as we talked about, we're going to see our midweek warm-up and then a return to showers for the weekend. This here is an indication that we could see cooler air lingering even later into week 2. So not just for this next weekend, but even after that, there's a signal for cooler and wetter conditions. So we'll have to see if that plays out. The models have a pretty good idea that we could continue to see cooler and wetter conditions into week 2. Here's the GEFS on the upper left, showing some kind of trough impacting the Pacific Northwest. The Canadian also shows lower to neutral heights over the west coast. It wants to start developing a trough in the central part of the U.S. and the east coast. The EPS, the European, is a little bit more in line with the GEFS. It's actually kind of a blend of the two. So I think this is a pretty good indication that even into week 2, we could see some cooler conditions. There definitely aren't any signals for excessive warmth during week 2. Week 3 changes a little bit. So here is the GEF ensemble and the Canadian ensemble on day 14. So that puts us out at June 23rd. This is day 16. And you can see this ridge starts to build over the Pacific Northwest with more of a signal for troughing along the east coast and maybe extending into the growing regions here in the northern plains. I think the models may be too quick with this transition for a couple reasons. The first is the angular momentum. Even though it's forecast to trend more positive by the end of week 2 and heading into week 3, over the last couple of days, the CFSV2 at least has been less bullish on this positive angular momentum trend. It's now showing more of a neutral look, whereas a couple days ago, most of the 4 members here were showing a positive angular momentum by the end of the month. That's important because if we look at the angular momentum correlations for June, a positive angular momentum would favor ridging, like the models are showing. And even into July, that's a signal for ridging. But if that angular momentum doesn't rise, in fact, if it stays negative, then we just reverse these colors and we get a trough over the west coast instead. So I think because the CFSV2 isn't quite as bullish on the angular momentum rising, that could be a sign that the models are a little bit too quick to warm things up by the end of the month. So let's recap all of that information. We did expect showers this weekend, and we got them. We even had some snow at the higher elevations. It looks like we can look forward to warming and drying through the middle of the week, though, with highs getting into the lower to mid 80s at most. But that MJO is going to camp out in phase 2 over the next couple of weeks, and that's going to favor a return to cooler and wetter weather for the weekend. Looks like showers arrive Friday. I wrote early Saturday here, but at this point it looks like showers could arrive Friday at the earliest. It does look like some cooler air may linger during week 2. Doesn't mean we'll see a ton of showers, but certainly this is not a signal for above normal temperatures. We have the angular momentum staying negative, we have the PNA going positive, and the NAO going negative. That alphabet soup just means that there's a trough that's going to sit along the west coast, most likely during week 2. And it looks like the models could be too fast with that late month warming trend. And again, as we talked about, that's probably because the angular momentum is going to stay in negative territory for a little bit longer going into the end of the month. So guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Don't forget to set your notifications so you can receive that next weekend update, and please leave a like if you enjoyed the forecast for today.